There is a specific kind of pain the avoidant feels when you finally stop reaching out. Not because you stopped caring, not because your feelings disappeared overnight, but because they slowly realize something they never expected to face. They had become used to you checking, used to you waiting, used to you forgiving, used to you softening the silence before it became too uncomfortable, used to you keeping the door open even when they were the one who kept walking away from it. So let me answer the question directly, before anything else. Yes, your absence matters. Mutual no contact changes the dynamic. It may not hit them immediately. They may even feel relief at first. But if they were relying on your emotional availability, and they were, then your silence removes something they quietly depended on. Their distance no longer has you holding it up. Their silence no longer rests on the assumption that you are still there, still caring, still waiting, still ready to receive them whenever they decide the space has gone on long enough. And that is exactly where the avoidant begins to lose the comfort they took for granted. That is what this video is about. Not whether they will come back, not whether silence can force someone to regret losing you. Something more honest than that. What happens to them and to you when you stop being the person who keeps the relationship alive for both of you. Because mutual no contact does not just mean they stop texting you, it means you stop too. You stop chasing, you stop checking, you stopped rescuing the connection from silence. You stopped offering emotional access to someone who never offered you emotional safety in return. And at first, it does not feel powerful. It feels awful. It feels like withdrawal. It feels like panic. It feels like you are abandoning the relationship by putting the phone down, when every part of your body wants to pick it back up. You stop typing the message you know you should not send. You stop checking whether they are online. You stop watching their stories for hidden meaning. You stop scanning for signs that they still care. And for a while, your nervous system reads that silence as danger. But hear this clearly. You did not go silent because you stopped caring. You went silent because caring had turned into self-abandonment. There is a difference between loving someone and slowly erasing yourself to keep them comfortable. No contact is the moment you stop doing the second one. This is not coldness. It is not manipulation. It is not punishment. It is what happens when you finally stop carrying the entire emotional weight of a relationship that was only ever half yours to hold. Before we go any further, if this is speaking to the exact place you are in right now, take a second to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It helps this reach the next person sitting in the same silence, trying not to send the message, trying not to check, trying to remember that no contact is not cruelty. It is what happens when you finally stop abandoning yourself. And if you do leave a comment, tell me this. What is the hardest part of mutual no contact for you right now? Not reaching out, not knowing what they feel, or realizing they expected you to keep waiting? So here is the part that hurts to hear, and the part you need to hear anyway. At first, the avoidant feels relief. When the messages stop, the pressure stops with them. No more difficult conversations. No more being asked to explain themselves. No more guilt sitting in the corner of their mind because they know they left something unanswered. No more feeling watched, needed, confronted, or accountable. For someone who experiences closeness as pressure, your silence can feel like breathing room. It can feel like they finally got out from under the weight of the relationship. And I know how that sounds when you are the one falling apart. It sounds like they won. It sounds like you made it easier for them by leaving. But let me draw the line precisely, because this matters. Relief is not indifference. Relief is not healing. Relief is not proof they never cared. Relief is the first thing a person feels when a source of pressure disappears. It says nothing about your worth. It says everything about how they handle closeness. Their first reaction is not the final truth. It is only stage one, And stage one is always the most misleading, because avoidance feels strongest right after the thing being avoided goes away. That early calm is not peace, it is distance, it is deactivation, it is the nervous system saying, nothing is being asked of me anymore, so I must be fine. But that kind of fine does not go very deep. Because here is the truth underneath the whole dynamic. The avoidant relied on your availability without ever respecting it. Being emotionally available meant you were still reachable, still hoping, still willing to repair things, still organized somewhere inside yourself, around them, and the relationship. And taking someone for granted means leaning on that care without protecting it, valuing it, or giving it back. They got used to being wanted. They got used to being chased. They got used to being forgiven before they had even asked. They got used to consequences that never fully arrived. They got used to you softening every silence, reopening every door, and doing the repair work before they had to lift a finger. That is the contradiction you were living inside. They may have acted like your care was too much, while quietly depending on it being there. They may have complained that you needed too much reassurance, while relying completely on your loyalty. They pulled away from closeness, while assuming your closeness would stay exactly where they left it. They treated your love like pressure, and they treated the idea of your absence like a threat, because they did not have to value your availability while they believed they could count on it. That is what being taken for granted really looks like. It is not always dramatic. It is not always cruel. Sometimes it is simply someone assuming they can neglect a bond and walk back into it whenever they are ready. They were comfortable with distance because they never believed distance would cost them you. Even when they did not text, they believed you would answer. Even when they pulled away, they believed you still cared. Even when they avoided repair, they believed the door was not fully shut. Even inside their own silence, they believed your feelings were still holding the bond in place. Your availability was the safety net under everything they did. It allowed them to step back without ever feeling like they were falling. Mutual no contact takes that net away. Your silence removes the background reassurance that they are still wanted. It removes the proof that you are still waiting. It removes the quiet emotional access they assumed would always be there. And without that access, the thing they always treated as a strategy, distance, stops being a strategy at all. It becomes something they actually have to feel. Their distance stops being a move they are making and becomes an experience of loss happening to them. That is the turn. At first, your silence feels like less pressure, then it starts to feel like less access, and that is when the dynamic changes, because the avoidant did not necessarily want to lose you. They wanted distance without loss. They wanted space without consequence. They wanted to keep the comfort of your devotion while avoiding the responsibility of showing up for it. Your absence matters because it makes those two things impossible to hold at the same time. This is why the early days feel so unfair. You and the avoidant entered no contact at the same moment, but you are living it on completely different clocks. Your timeline starts in panic. You feel the silence immediately. You are flooded with questions, memories, urges, fantasies of reaching out, and a fear that will not sit still. Every hour without contact feels like fresh evidence that you have been abandoned. Their timeline starts in relief. They distract themselves, they stay busy, they rationalize it, they tell themselves this is better, that they needed space, that things were too intense, that they are finally free from the pressure. But neither timeline stays still. You slowly begin to settle. They slowly begin to notice. You move from panic towards steadiness. They move from relief towards uncertainty. And eventually, the picture starts to invert. At first, you feel the loss, and they feel the relief. Later, you begin to feel the relief, and they begin to feel the loss. You were not weaker than them. You were simply early to the pain. They were late to it. Their noticing does not usually arrive as a dramatic breakdown. Do not wait for a tearful confession or a perfectly written apology, because that is not usually how avoidant discomfort first shows itself. It arrives as small interruptions in their day. Your name does not appear on their phone. You do not react to their post. You do not check in. You do not ask how they are. You do not chase the vague signal they put out. You do not rescue the connection from the quiet. And slowly, they realize they no longer know where they stand with you. That matters more than they expected, because distance gave them control. They felt in control when they decided when to reply. They felt in control when they decided how close the two of you became. They felt in control when they could step back and still assume you would stay put. They felt in control because they believed silence was reversible. They believed they could break it whenever they chose. They believed your heart was still arranged around them, waiting in the background. Mutual no contact pulls those certainties out from under them. Now they do not know if you are waiting. They do not know if you would answer. They do not know if the door is open. They do not know whether your feelings are still facing in their direction. They do not know if they still have access to you at all. And when you stop chasing, they lose the only version of the relationship that ever fully worked for them, the version where they could dodge responsibility and still keep your devotion. Now, let us turn back to you, because there is something you were doing that almost nobody saw. You were doing both halves of the relationship. You initiated the repair. You checked in. You smoothed over the conflict. You explained your feelings again and again, hoping that this time it would land. You made excuses for them, to other people, and to yourself. You turned crumbs into hope. You kept the relationship alive inside your own head, on days when there was nothing real to hold on to. You treated their emotional absence as a problem that was yours to solve. And that is exhausting. It is exhausting to be the one always reaching across the gap. It is humiliating to keep asking for care that should have been freely given. It is destabilizing to feel like the relationship only exists when you are actively holding it up, that the second you let go, there would be nothing there. So here is what no contact really is for you. No contact is the moment you stop doing their half of the relationship. You are not destroying the connection. You are finding out what is actually left once you stop carrying it alone. And this is the part that cuts the deepest. You are not only hurting because they pulled away. You are hurting because they seemed to believe they could pull away, and you would simply remain available. They acted like your care would keep. They acted like your patience had no end. They acted like your forgiveness was automatic, like it did not have to be earned. They acted like your love would stay open even while they neglected it. They acted like you would absorb the confusion, survive the silence, and still be standing there whenever they finally felt like coming back. So I know the question sitting underneath all of this: did they only realize my value when I stopped making myself so easy to keep? Here is the honest answer. Sometimes people do not understand the weight you were carrying until you finally put it down. Sometimes your worth only becomes visible in your absence, because your presence was treated like a given, like furniture, like something that would always be in the room. But understand why you are doing this, because it changes everything. You are not going silent to make them value you. You are going silent because you have finally started valuing yourself. The first keeps you hooked to their reaction. The second is what sets you free. So what does it look like on their side once your absence stops being theoretical and starts being real? I will not promise you exactly what they will do, because nobody can. But I will tell you what tends to surface when the silence is no longer cushioned by your availability. They feel confused, they feel restless, they feel irritated and cannot quite explain why. They get nostalgic. They revisit memories they had filed away. They wonder whether you have moved on. They check, quietly, whether you are still reachable. Not always directly, often indirectly. A story view, a vague message, a strange post, a sudden appearance after weeks of nothing, a small signal that says, "Are you still there?" without requiring them to say anything honest out loud. And if that happens, be careful. A signal is not repair. Curiosity is not accountability. Missing access to you is not the same as being ready to love you properly. They may feel your absence sharply and still not have the maturity to meet it with action. They may regret taking you for granted and still only reach out to check whether the door is open. They may miss you and still not be ready to become safe. That is why your silence cannot be a performance for them. It has to be protection for you. Here is the plain version of what is happening. The absence becomes uncomfortable because nothing is cushioning it now. Avoidance is easy when someone is still waiting. Distance is easy when someone is still reaching. Silence is easy when someone else is holding the bond together. But when nobody is holding it, when you have genuinely let go, the silence stops being a setting they chose and becomes a fact they have to live inside. That is when the avoidant finally feels the cost of something they handled carelessly. Not because you engineered it, not because you manipulated them into pain, not because you turned no contact into a game, because you stopped absorbing the consequence for them. And while all of this is happening on their side, your own timeline is turning too. At first, the silence is panic. Then, day by day, it becomes discipline, something you choose and hold. Then, it becomes protection, something that keeps you safe instead of hurting you. Then, almost without noticing, it becomes relief, and eventually, it becomes proof. Proof that you can survive without chasing. Proof that you were never as helpless as the panic told you. Proof that the relationship did not only exist because you loved them, but because you were exhausting yourself trying to keep it alive. You see it in small, ordinary things. You go a few hours without checking. You delete the message you drafted. You stop reading meaning into every online flicker. You stop holding your breath for a notification. You start sleeping better. The anger comes out cleaner, no longer tangled so tightly with longing. You remember you have a life of your own, and somewhere along the way, the question changes. You came in asking, "Do they feel my absence?" But the question that actually frees you is different. What was I carrying? Was I the one keeping this connection alive? Was I mistaking their distance for emotional depth? Was I reading their crumbs as proof of love? Was I handing unlimited access to someone who only handed me uncertainty back? Was I confusing being needed with being cherished? Was I waiting for someone to finally value what they had already shown me they were willing to neglect? Was I more committed to who they might become than to my own peace right now? And then ask yourself one more question, plainly. If they took your availability for granted, what would it cost you to keep proving they still have it? Because understanding the avoidant is not the same as excusing them. Understanding their relief does not mean blaming yourself for leaving. Understanding their fear of closeness does not mean giving up your need for consistency. Understanding that they may miss you does not mean waiting for them to become ready. Understanding that they took you for granted does not mean making yourself available all over again so they can do it twice. So hear these plainly. You are not invisible. You are not disposable. You are not foolish for caring. Their relief was not proof you meant nothing. Their silence does not erase what was real between you. Your absence is not invisible to them. Mutual no contact changes the dynamic because you are no longer carrying the relationship alone. Distance without consequence is what they were used to. You are allowed to stop being the consequence they never had to feel. You do not need to chase to prove you love them. You do not need to stay available to prove you are kind. You do not need their regret to prove your value. You do not need their return to prove you mattered. You are not abandoning them. You are stopping the abandonment of yourself. So let us answer the real questions one more time. No, their silence does not mean you meant nothing. No, that first wave of relief does not erase the relationship. No, your absence is not invisible to them. Yes, they took your availability for granted. Yes, they assumed you would always be there. Yes, mutual no contact changes the dynamic, genuinely and for good. But your silence is not a tactic. It is not punishment. It is not a performance staged for their benefit. It is the moment you stopped holding a two-person relationship together by yourself. They feel your absence, and that is their consequence to face, not yours to soften. They miss you, and that is their feeling to sit with, not yours to fix. They may come to regret taking you for granted, and if they do, that regret is theirs to meet with maturity, accountability, and action. Not just a vague message, not just a story view, not just a small attempt to see whether you are still within reach, because in the end, it was never really about whether they notice the silence. Of course they notice. They notice when access disappears. They notice when the person who kept the emotional door open finally stops standing beside it. What matters is that you notice too. You notice how much you were carrying. You notice how much energy the uncertainty was taking from you. You notice how often you called it love when it was really anxiety, hope, loyalty, fear, and exhaustion braided together. And once you notice that, you cannot fully unknow it. That is the quiet power of mutual no contact. It does not just change what they feel, it changes what you are willing to carry. It shows you the difference between love and self-abandonment. It shows you the difference between missing someone and making yourself available to be heard again. So let them feel the silence. Let them notice the space where your devotion used to be. Let them sit with the distance they thought they wanted. You do not have to soften it for them anymore. I have been the Relationship Detective, and thank you for watching. If this helped you see things more clearly, please give it a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. I wish everyone watching all the best, and I hope to see you again in the next one.